to be different, called to be changed. So God, make us different, make us change so we can shine in the darkest places. Shine so they can see your face. Shine and experience your amazing grace. So let us shine.
Good morning again. There we go. This morning, this past week, I debated multiple different sermons. I actually wrote, I think 5, until I landed on this one. And all of them had the same key verses in them, a lot of the same undertones, until I landed on this one. And it took a lot of work and preparation, because what I'm going to be talking to you about is preparing for vision, to be specific. JJ is currently on sabbatical through the General Conference Sabbatical Program. If you aren't aware what that is, that basically is a subsidy program where they help pay for a lot of the things and a lot of the expenses during his program, so that he is able to do the things he needs to do, and our church is able to continue doing the things that we need to be able to do. So on his sabbatical, before he left, he said his goal was to create like a next step, to be thoughtful in prayer, to be able to spiritually fill himself and take time to do that, so then he could go to God and say, what is the next step for Pine Grove? Here is our vision or our goal, our purpose statement is to worship God, to proclaim the gospel, and to nourish people within the church. And so he's looking into what's the next step. How do we complete that task? How do we do that? So when he comes back, we need to be prepared to hear what he has to say, to hear what he has been working on. I know that's going to be in August, and this is June, but we need all of that time, June, July, and the first week of August, to also prepare ourselves. So this is going to be a guiding factor for you guys and what we need to be doing as we await what he has to say. So let's start with Philippians 1, 9 and 10. The first thing that we need to be doing is praying for discernment for ourselves and for JJ and for the leaders of our church as he comes back. We need to be praying for wisdom and guidance, for God to be walking alongside us as we are going to take these next steps. And we need to be praying for our own hearts to be willing to maybe make a few changes if that needs to happen. So Philippians 1, 9 and 10. I'm in Philippians 4. That's why that did not look right. Sorry. Philippians 1, 9 and 10. This is kind of Paul is writing to Philippi, and he is saying a prayer for them. And he says, and I pray this, that your love will keep on growing in knowledge and in every kind of discernment, so that you can approve the things that are superior and can be pure and blameless in the days of Christ. So basically saying, I pray for you that you have love that is continuing to grow and have knowledge, every kind of discernment, and that you are able to discern what are the things that are approved to be doing for Christ, the things that you need to be doing. So he's saying, I'm praying that you have discernment in what you need to do next. Discernment is basically the ability to say yes or no to something and say, oh yeah, that is a good idea, or oh no, that's not a good idea. To be able to look at something objectively and decide whether or not it's something that we should or should not be doing. So while we are praying, as JJ is rejuvenating his own spiritual life and looking what to do next, but being able to have discernment and praying for discernment for our leaders and for JJ, but also for ourselves, because he might come back with a lot of ideas. He might come back with one. He might come back and say, well, I think what we're doing is great. Let's keep doing what we're doing. We don't know what he's going to come back with. And so being able to discern what he says is, oh yeah, I like that.
but not my own personal preferences, but I have prayed about it, have thought about it, and yeah, I agree with that. Being able to ask for that. Being able to ask that we have this love in our lives that continues to grow, that allows us to listen and accept, because without that, we might be a little cynical of ideas. We might be not wanting the change as much. And so we need to be able to say, yeah, JJ, we love you. We appreciate that you've spent this time, these past 3 months, on looking for what to do. And so we're going to listen. Let's also look at Psalms 143 in the same vein of prayer. This psalm is David is crying out for help for the Lord because he's facing a lot of enemies at the time. And he says this in it. In verse 10 of Psalm 143, "Teach me to do your will, for you are my God. May your gracious spirit lead me on level ground." Like I said, this is when David is experiencing something difficult in his life. He has some enemies against him. But this isn't an uncommon theme that David asks for prayer. He also says very similar words to this in Psalm 23, which is one of the most well-known psalms. I think it's one that we all learn as we grow up. It's a common memory verse of the entire psalm. And it says, David's like, yeah, you are my shepherd. You have led my path. You have made my path straight and led me to righteousness. And that's in a good time. And so David, in both times of his life, good and bad, he says, Lord, you are my path guider. You are my teacher. So we need to be praying that God is leading us and laying a path for us, and that we are aware of it, that we are looking for it, and that JJ can see it as well. So as we await for his return in August, be praying for discernment and for the ability to see God's path and that God is guiding us. But how does God guide us? Well, he guides us with his Spirit. Now, I'm not saying that it is a person of Spirit, but that it is his gift that he has given us that helps guide us through life. That means we need to be expecting his Spirit to be moving. Expecting his Spirit to be moving. What do you think that looks like? I think that looks like listening, being prepared, prayerfully considering that the Spirit is going to rest upon us. We are told that through baptism we have been given this gift of the Spirit. And so are we expecting it to be leading our lives? Are we expecting it to be guiding us, to be giving us spiritual gifts and spiritual wisdom? In 1 Corinthians 2:12 and 14, this is a part of the Spirit that we should be expecting. This is the part that we should be praying for and looking for as we prepare for vision. In 1 Corinthians 2:12, "Now we have not received the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who comes from God, so that we may understand what has been freely given to us by God. We also speak these things not in words taught by human wisdom, but in those taught by the Spirit, explaining spiritual things to spiritual people. But the unbeliever does not welcome what comes from God's Spirit, because it is foolishness to him. He is not able to understand it, since it is elevated spiritually." So in this, Paul is saying this Spirit is going to give godly wisdom, and you need to be open to it. People who are unbelievers don't see it. They see it as foolish. And people who don't have the God Spirit, they have one of the world, and that is not where we're wanting to be. Instead, we are looking for God's Spirit, of his wisdom, of what to do, where to go, and how to live our lives. Next, when this Spirit is within us, through baptism, we have gained this Spirit, we also gain something else, which in Galatians 5 is where we will see, which this Spirit is going to be guiding us,
and we're expecting it to be with us, and so we aren't only expecting wisdom, but we are also expecting a specific attitude and culture from this Spirit that we have. And this attitude and culture can help prepare for our vision, because with a good attitude, we usually are more open to different ideas. So Galatians 5, verses 22 to 26, if you're taking notes, or if you're following along. So verse 22 says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faith, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. Now those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified in the flesh with its passions and desires. Since we live by the Spirit, we must also follow the Spirit. We must not become conceited, provoking one another, or envying one another." So in this passage, we see what we will have from the Spirit and what we shouldn't have from the Spirit, and that we should be following the Spirit throughout our lives. So love, how does that help us prepare for vision? Well, if we love each other and if we're loving God, we want to build each other up. We want to be there for each other, and we want to be the best for each other. And so we're going to be a little more open to different things. Joy. It's really hard to be joyful while we're waiting and while there is a potential change to come. And then throughout that, it's really easy to get grumpy. I say this from a lot of experience of waiting. There is a time in my life where we were waiting to hear what was going to happen with my younger siblings. We had fostered them for a long time, and then they went to a pre-adoptive home, which means that home was planning to adopt them because my family at the time were like, we're exhausted. These kids are a lot of work. We don't think God is telling us to adopt them. And then a lot of people in our church congregation said, I think you guys messed up. And God kept telling us, hey, I think you guys messed up. And then suddenly we got a call from the agency saying, hey, the pre-adoptive home doesn't want to do this anymore. And my family said, yes. However, there was a lot of time in between that call and the first, I think you guys messed up. In that waiting period, it was really, really hard to have joy, because a piece was missing from our lives. And joy was hard to find, and we tried to seek it so often. Right now, we're waiting. JJ is gone right now, and we have to wait for his return to come back to have this vision that he hopes to have. And we might say, well, it's so long, it's so far away. What happens if he doesn't get a vision? What do we do right now? We have to continue to foster an attitude of joy as we wait. And then joy once he returns, because he might say, hey, there's something that I really want to have changed, but you guys are going to have a really hard time with that, because it's either something we do traditionally, or it's something that, I know changing colors is really hard at a building. There's a variety of things that can come about that it's oh, that doesn't make me happy. Well, instead, take a step back and have joy about the situation of, oh yeah, this could really help. Peace, being patient, being calm, having kindness towards one another as we wait, and having kindness towards JJ when he comes back, because it's really easy to say the first thing that comes to mind when it's something new, something different. And it's really easy for those words to not be kind. It's really easy for those words to say, absolutely not. No thanks, man. Instead, we need to be fostering and expecting this culture of kindness. The Spirit living within us is going to help us have these attributes in our life while we wait and while we prepare. Now, we also must have an attribute like the Bereans. If you aren't familiar with who they are, in Acts 17:11, they're commended for their studying. They have heard the message, and they go and study it themselves. And so it's pointed out and it's like, go and do what they do. They go and study. They go and look at the stuff too. So as we prepare, we can look into, well, what does it look like to worship God? What does it look like to proclaim his gospel? What does it look like to nourish his flock and to nourish our congregation? You can be studying that yourself and praying over that yourself as we await for JJ to come back with this vision, with how we are going to complete those steps. And once he comes back, you can continue studying as he tells us of, hey, I think we should do this, and go and study it before you have a response to it, because it's really easy to have emotional responses. Instead, go and study and think and pray first. Now let's look at an example of someone who had to change, who didn't necessarily want to. It's Moses in Exodus. We aren't going to read everything because there is a lot. We're going to read kind of his responses of how he was responding to God when God has decided to call him away from being a shepherd in the desert to do something that was different, to work for his people in a different way. In Exodus 3:11, Moses' first response after saying, like, here I am, like, God called him, he was like, I'm here. And then God said what God wanted from him, and Moses' response in verse 11 said, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the Israelites out of Egypt? His first thing was like, who am I to do that? Like, are you sure you got the right guy? Then again in 13, he says, if I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What should I tell them? So he's doubting that he will be able to answer their questions. In 4:13, he says, please, Lord, send someone else. He just flats out says, not me. Please send someone else. He's like, no, it's going to be you. Because sometimes things are uncomfortable, but God needs us to do his work of proclaiming the gospel, of worshiping him, and of nourishing our congregation. And sometimes waiting to hear for a change or accepting a change is really uncomfortable, and we want to be like Moses and say, no, maybe not. I, for one, am usually very adverse to change, especially if something is very like this, has been the same my whole life. I don't want it to change. For example, now I'm going to try to be as specific as possible without sounding really geeky. I love Disney World. That's a fact that I think all of you should be plainly aware of by now. I usually have, like on Wednesdays, I have Disney shoes on all the time. Like I have a Disney purse. Love Disney World. There was one ride at Disney World that I loved, and most people didn't. It was called Maelstrom. It was a story of Vikings. But it was pretty old and outdated, kind of boring because it was a little more on the educational side. But my family made a point every time to visit that one, and we had fun each time. We would interact with the cast members, and we would just go all out on this ride. We would memorize it so then we could quote it along with it. And we had so much fun on this ride. And we made sure we did it every time. And then Disney caught on that not a lot of people rode this ride. Not a lot of people liked it. So they said, in order to make this something that people actually want to go to, in order to make this more kid-friendly, since it was more educational, a lot of kids thought it was boring, they changed the ride to a Frozen-themed ride, like the movie with Elsa and Anna and Olaf. They changed the ride to be like that. And let me tell you, the wait times for that ride are now hour and a half, 2 hours, instead of walking on to a peaceful boat ride looking at Vikings. It is now waiting in a hot line for an hour and a half to go and watch Elsa and look at her castle. It is a really cool ride. Like, granted, Disney did great with it for the most part. And it has had great effects for them. It has increased their number of people that like the number of people that go to that area, has increased the capacity of how many people can be on a ride at a time. It has increased a lot for them. Even though it kind of put us out at the time of, we really miss that old ride. We really want that old ride back. But we see that there are great benefits to change. There are great benefits to it being changed to something else, because it has a larger and wider impact and is putting smiles on a larger group of people and is reaching younger kids, it's reaching families. And so sometimes there's going to be a change in our life that we don't really want yet, or it might make us uncomfortable. But as we await for it, we can be praying, expecting the Spirit within our lives, fostering a culture of love and unity and positivity, and an ability to step back and study before we respond to things, and being okay with a little discomfort for a lot of good in the long run. I'll pray while the band comes back up. Dear God, we lift up your vision and your goal for our church, and we lift up JJ as he is searching for what to do next for us, where to guide our church, what to do for us to best proclaim your good news, best worship you, and best nourish those around us. Allow him to have discernment and the ability to see what to do next, and allow us to be open-minded, to be peaceable and kind when he comes back with an idea. Allow us to wait on you and pray for your Spirit's guidance as we await JJ's return and as we prepare for the next step in our ministry as a church. We praise you that you have gifted us the Spirit that could be within us, that can guide us, that can grant us wisdom and an attitude of love and kindness and joy towards one another. May your Spirit be within us today as we go out and pray and expect you and your guidance in all of our days. In your Son's name, amen.
So let us shine in a